Hi everybody, welcome back to our channel Autistic Multiple Life. This channel was created to erase stigma around autism and dissociative identity disorder and other type of neurodiversities, and to speak about intersectionality. Sorry, it could be a little loud here. I decided to make this video on the street, and it's not the perfect weather. I want to go to park, but decided that it's better to make it somewhere more close to home. Yeah, because of the weather. And in this video I want to speak about another topic about intersectionality, not about neurodiversity stuff. I want to speak more about Israel and Palestine and Israel and Arab countries, but not about politics, but about our personal experience. Like I said before, we was refugees in Israel, and I want to say what I've seen when I live here. Okay, now I don't know who is fronting. I think it's Bukamza and Ayman. But when we decided to make this video, we consulted with Eric and Rumpel, because Eric and Rumpel was the guys who, together with Ayman, fronted more in Israel. At first, it's a really emotional topic for us, because how to explain it? Ayman faced very strong anti-Semitism in teenage, and because of it, and because of Jewish culture was the only culture of your ancestors that they understand. Because of all this stuff, Ayman have very strong Zionist identity, and Israel was the first country where Ayman don't feel that they are completely alienated, like in Ukraine and in Russia, and it was kind of relief, a big relief. Because in Russia and in Ukraine, everyone says that if you don't accept this culture, if you don't like these countries, that you wouldn't be at home anywhere, that you would have hate every country, how you could hate Ukraine when you was born, after that hate Russia, and have any hopes that you could accept any other countries. And Ayman knew that these people wrong, but it was some kind of doubt, because everyone told it, and these doubts just this doubts ended when we was in Israel. But in the same time, some guys in our system, when Ayman was a Muslim, Ayman was bleated, and some guys in our system have very strong of connection with Muslim Ummah, and because of it, it's difficult for us to read about what's going on in Gaza too. And yeah, so I just want to say that it's a very emotional topic at first, and in second, we wouldn't speak about Balfour Declaration, we wouldn't speak about recent stuff that's going on, we wouldn't speak about Hamas or Bibi or what kind of politics we want to see in Israel. We would speak only what our system see when we live in Israel, about our personal experience and this kind of relationship between Jewish and Arabs that we see. Okay, at first, how we end up in Israel? We end up in Israel because of Ayman's activism. Ayman have to leave Russia. Ayman wasn't a Russian citizen. Ayman was a refugee in Russia too, but Russian authority threatened Ayman deportation in Donetsk in Ukraine, and so Ayman's partner Lina and Ayman flew to Israel to ask an American visa. Why American visa? Because American culture really is the closest culture to us, and because we knew English, and because our friend promised, not promised, but give to us this kind of. They invited us to be speakers on event about disability rights in USA, and we was hoping that after we came to this kind of conference, we would ask permission to stay. We would ask asylum. We knew that it's really difficult because of Trump administration. Okay, and in Russia, this kind of embassies don't work in well, and we need to come to any other country to ask American visa. So we came to Israel, and our friends who live in Israel help us, but of course we don't have this American visa, and it was the idea of verbal or persecuted to came to Israel, and so we stuck in Israel without documents, without money. I mean, our system and Ayman's wife Lina, it was very hard time to us, and honestly sometimes we couldn't even thinking about some stuff that going on in this time, because we have very strong emotional problems, and we're very grateful to our friends in Israel who help us with money, who help us anyway. Yeah, so we ask asylum in Israel because we don't have any other choices. And at first, I think I need to explain this context because it's related to what we see. It's related to our perspective. Our friends help us to find a flat. In Israel, like in Russia, the government don't give any help to asylum seekers, and we were asylum seeker. So it's not like in Britain, okay? So it's no help at all. And in Israel, everything is very, 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 very expensive. It's prices much bigger than in UK. And our friends who live in Israel, friends that Ayman knew from Autistic activism movement, from neurodiversity movement, these friends really help us, and these friends of Gil's family, they kind of Ayman's, I don't know, kind of Ayman's adopted parents, because they are more close to parents that Ayman really have. And yeah, they help us to find flat, they help us with some furniture to this flat, and we was renting this flat, and at the same time Lina's sister and Lina help us to with this flat. So it was Lina's family and these friends who help us in Israel. We don't have right to work at all. In Israel, if you're asylum seeker, you don't have right to work, you don't have ever right to be a volunteer. So I don't know what kind of idea they have how asylum seeker could live in Israel if you don't have any kind of benefits, you don't have any kind of accommodation, and you don't have even right to work. It was situation when someone was deported, for example, for just looking at kids of their friends, not just for money, but just like this, or to their relatives, or because the government decided that it was working. So it's really, I don't know how to say it politely, but it's bullshit. And yeah, immigration system is much better than in Russia. At least they don't yell at you in your interview. They call you to names that you prefer. They, if you are autistic, they give you opportunity to steam in. You could came with your solicitor. Government don't provide solicitor like in UK. So the solicitor is kind of solicitor that NGO provides, and our friends, they're from activist community like we, so they have connection in NGO, and of course because of our case was a little unusual, NGO help us. Yeah, we knew that we don't have any chances to have this asylum in Israel, because no one from Eastern Europe ever have asylum in Israel. It's just impossible for LGBT people from Eastern Europe to have asylum in Israel, okay? But we were hoping that we would find Ayman's dead Jewish documents, and would ask for citizenship. This document was in war zone, so we don't find it, and 4 months later we live in Israel to UK. Why we live Israel to UK? because our friends, more like a sequences, I say friends, but more like a sequences from LGBT organization. Ayman provides some events about autism to this organization, and they tell us all the stories that you could ask asylum in UK, even if you don't have UK visas. And Lina, Ayman's wife, insisted that we need to come to UK. Ayman have doubts because Ayman like Israel, so we have this stuff. But we don't feel sorry that we live in Israel, because it was very difficult first months. But now we are happy that we stay here, okay? And we love UK. Our system feel more comfortable in UK than we was in Israel as whole, not just their requirement, but as a system. Okay, so this is a context: no help, no accommodation, but some friends, some support from friends, some support for NGO. For example, we first have medical help because of our obsessive compulsive disorder and mental stuff not in private, but in charity clinic in Tel Aviv. So yeah, in Israel it's many groups, many NGOs that have undocumented people, have Arabs who don't have citizenship, help refugees. It's really plenty of this kind of organization and NGO. And this kind of NGO sometimes the last help for many people, okay? And now about our experience and what we see with this Arab relationship, Arab Jewish relationship. In these 4 months, at first we were living in Tel Aviv, after that we living in Haifa, but we traveling with our friends a lot. We was in Tel Aviv many times because all of our interview was in Tel Aviv, and we need sometimes it was like several days. They said that you need to come to Tel Aviv, where you would stay and how you would come in the early of the morning. It's your problems, so we couldn't do it without our friends. Yeah, but we came to Tel Aviv many times. We was traveling just for traveling to Jerusalem and to other cities, so it's not just about Haifa experience, okay? At first, good stuff, okay? It was good stuff. It's not so many good stuff, but good stuff that society is really diverse. It's kind of Arab businesses everywhere, Jewish businesses everywhere. It's Arab restaurants, and Jewish people and tourists came to these Arab restaurants and Jewish restaurants where everyone could come. It's all this important information government provided, so kind of, I don't know, streets naming or town naming, city naming, all this kind of it's double language in Arabic and in Hebrew, so you could find anything in Arabic and in Hebrew, in clinics, in schools, in the street. Okay, it's double language. And in the same time when we came, government want to make some laws that Hebrew would be the only language for all the stuff, and Jewish people and most of the people was really angry. They won't live in this double language kind of community. Yeah, and it's stereotype that you couldn't see. It's kind of apartheid, and you couldn't see in the level of just living in the city, and you couldn't see stereotype about this apartheid, that you couldn't see Jewish people, you couldn't see Arab people in Jewish neighborhood or in Jewish shops or in malls, or you couldn't find information in Arabic. You could find information in Arabic, and it's plenty Arab people everywhere. And yeah, so community is really diverse. Mosques are open. It's so many mosques, and you could hear Muezzin, and it's one of my first experience in Israel, in Tel Aviv, when we heard Muezzin in the morning. When Ayman was Muslim in Russia, it's no much mosques in Russia, of course, and we never live near the mosques. But in Israel, yeah, this kind of Maudzin, our first place when we stayed, one of our first experience. We live not even in Tel Aviv, but in Yaffo. Yaffo is Arabic neighborhood of Tel Aviv, okay? And now it's good stuff. The diversity is this double language stuff. Now the bad stuff. At first, it's really many hatred in community. At first, Arabs, many Arabs in Israel is really anti-Semitic. So if you look like a Jewish, for example, my wife, she's not Jewish, she's have kind of Roma ancestors, but she look like more like Jewish that, for example, I don't know, me, or for example that Arab, because most Arabs are Muslims, so Lina of course don't wear niqab or hijab, and she faced this kind of sexual harassment in Yaffo and in Haifa almost every time when she came to the street, sometimes several times a day. It was literally sexual harassment every time that Lina came to the street. So it's a kind of sexual harassment culture in this I don't know. So I don't know, but in Russia it's really often sexual harassment in the street happens really often, much often that in UK. But in Israel it's even more often. And Arabs harassed only women who look like Jewish or who are Jewish, okay? No, not of course only this women. Arabs openly could harass their own women, and Jewish could harass everyone. But in the street, you see only this picture when, how to explain it? Jewish sexual harassment most of all happens like sexual harassment in UK behind the closed door, in families, in communities, in synagogues and churches, so it's behind the closed door. And Arab sexual harassment is behind the closed door. But this kind of open sexual harassment in the street, it's our Arab toward Jewish women in the street openly, several times a day sometimes. And I hate all the stereotypes that Arab used to sexual harassment people in Europe or in USA. We don't see any sexual harassment from Arabs here. Never, really never. And we live with refugees from different cultures, from different countries, Arab countries, but never see this open sexual harassment. The only exclusion of this rule was going on in Israel, okay? And we don't think that it was more sorry. Yeah, and we don't think that it was more about Israeli Arabs, more about. We think that it was more about, I don't know, anti-Semitic culture that exists, okay? And it's really many Arabs mobs, Arab gangs everywhere in Haifa. It's young Arab people who couldn't find work, I think, and many this kind of, they behave like a gang. I'm not sure that they're really gangs or mobs, but they behave like gangs or mobs. And how to explain it? It's kind of stuff that they're doing. It's like they became really noisy in Shabbat. They became really noisy on Yom Kippur when all Jewish praying and fasting, and they made this kind of smelly shashliks near Jewish neighborhood, near ultra-Orthodox neighborhood, and they switched off on loud music. So most Jewish try to be most atheists just kind of respect these Jewish traditions, and most Jewish just they they just fasting and praying in this day. It's very very no one in the street in this day, like in Christmas in UK. No one except these gangs, these young Arabs people, these young Arabs gangs. We never faced any problems from, of course, from Arab women in Israel. They was very nice, and when I see them, I just don't understand some hatred toward them. But these young men, they were awful, and they were many of these young men, not all, because sometimes we see we see some nice men, of course, Arab men, for example. One man, for example, pay for me when I don't have enough money in the market. One young Arab man, family man, but it's so many of these kind of gangs. They're not nice at all. That they made this kind of inappropriate behavior, openly inappropriate and openly disrespectful behaviors toward Jewish in the holidays and in Shabbat. It's like openly provocation. It was openly provocation, or the sexual harassment. It was openly provocation. Okay, so we wasn't surprised when this kind of pogroms, which was from Arabs part started, but we was really surprised at first when it started from Jewish part, because we most communicated, because we was from activist community. We most communicated with this kind of. We most communicated with this kind of. Leftists, and when we say that, for example, why this young Arab became so noisy in Yom Kippur, or why this young Arab harassing women every time when we go into the street, everyone feel pity, not pity, but sorry for these young Arabs. Everyone try to justify their behaviors because they are poor, they are oppressed, they don't know better, and sometimes they just say that no, they don't do it, even if they see it. And Jewish people that we knew tried to be very nice with them. Even some right people who vote for Netanyahu, not for Likud, not for Avoda, okay, and even some, but not radical right, but right, and all left that we knew. We live not just near this Arab neighborhood, we live near partly Russian neighborhood, and near ultra-Orthodox, from once here ultra-Orthodox neighborhood, here Arab neighborhood, here I think it was here our home, here I think it was like kind of Ethiopian Jewish. Ethiopian, we don't have any problems, we don't see any problems with Ethiopian Jewish, black Jewish in the street at all. One time it was a weird accident with Orthodox Jewish, that one Orthodox Jewish man pushed me to female part of the street. But every time that we was going through this ultra-Orthodox Jewish neighborhood, they were just ordinary people in not ordinary clothes. But most people in Israel, if they don't like someone, they don't like ultra-Orthodox Jewish. Just because they look weird, I think. Yeah, they're ultra-conservative, and I don't like that they're ultra-conservative, but most critics are just because they look weird, and we don't like it, okay? It doesn't mean that we support this, they're ultra-conservative. Okay, and Russian people, Russian Jewish, sometimes they could be annoying, and this is other part of not very nice experience. Some of them are really deeply Islamophobic. So some these Russian-speaking Jewish people are deeply Islamophobic and Arabophobic. Some of them, for example, came to not our friends, but we see these people. It was, I think, 2 times when I speak with this kind of people. They was afraid that it's not disability right or LGBT right community. It's something near. So it's friend of our friends, and one time it was No, one time it was women who is openly feminist and kind of sometimes behave kind of like feminist activists, translated some articles, stuff like this. But they don't hate even when they came to Europe or in UK and see many Arabs on the street and many Muslims, they hate it. So yeah, at first we was surprised that this kind of pogroms from Jewish part started, but after that we remind these people and wasn't really surprised because yeah, we see this kind of Arabophobia and Islamophobia, and surprisingly it wasn't from people who live in small kibbutz, it was from people who live in city, who know how it's going on in UK, who knows that this hatred don't exist in UK, who knows that how it's going on in European or USA or UK big cities. They knew it, but they just hate Muslim and they just hate Arabs. So yeah, it's big problems in communities. Okay, they kind of hate it in communities, and but in everyday lives it's kind of Arabs exist in their neighborhood, Jewish exists, ordinary Jewish exist in everywhere. I think Ethiopian Jewish exists in their neighborhood, ultra Orthodox exists in their neighborhood. It's mixed in the malls, it's mixed in the restaurants. Of course, not in all restaurants, because some restaurants are strictly halal and some are strictly kosher and others not. But in some shops and in some cafes, mix it. Yeah, and but everyone have this kind of their own culture. I think in this little bit like in New York in before the war, when you have this kind of Italian neighborhood, this kind of Yiddish neighborhood, this kind of Jewish neighborhood, and this kind of ordinary American neighborhood. Yeah, it's a little bit like this. I see first time in my life stuff like this. Okay, and yeah, stuff like this. And I feel really sorry that the most openly Zionists that you could see in Western media, they're bigots, as the most openly conservative and pro-Zionist, most of them like Trump. I feel really sorry for that, because it's not true for Israel. Okay, what else? I think is in the last stuff, it's about this kind of stupidity. This kind of, many people now think that it's kind of conspiracy from Hamas or from Netanyahu or from someone, from some staff, that it was doing on purpose. But I think now war have their own life, and no one was planning it to be like this. And I knew what it is when Netanyahu made some kind of decision that no one likes, but it was election, and no one could do anything because of this complicated stuff with elections, and of course he need to go. Okay, so everyone's still safe. Thank you so much for your attention. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel to make it more visible. And I just want to remember you, I don't speak about this war, I don't speak about Zionist history, I don't speak about Nakba or Palestinian or Arabic history or Ottoman Empire history or Gaza's history. Or political prognosis. I speak about only my personal experience, what my friends who live in these territories thinks, what they write, and what we are seeing when we live in Israel. It's just personal stuff. Yeah, it's not political analytical video. Okay, see you next time. Bye.